If you walk through the streets of any major American city today, you will notice something unsettling. The landscape feels different, not just physically, but emotionally. Towering skyscrapers still rise into the sky, but beneath their shadows, the cracks are clear. Storefronts once filled with small businesses now stand empty, plastered with for-lease signs. Parks where families once gathered now often serve as makeshift shelters for the unhoused. There's a sense that the country is drifting, losing touch with the very promise it once offered. Not long ago, America was described as the land of endless possibility. People from around the world dreamed of coming here, chasing opportunities they believed didn't exist anywhere else. For many, that dream did come true. Stable jobs, affordable homes, safe neighborhoods, and the ability to pass on a better life to the next generation. But that vision has eroded. Today, millions of Americans are working harder than ever, yet falling further behind. Wages can't keep pace with rising costs, and entire communities that once thrived now struggle to survive. Consider the housing market. A generation ago, owning a home was a realistic goal for middle-class families. It was seen as a milestone, a piece of security, and a foundation for building wealth. Fast forward to today, and home ownership feels like a distant fantasy for many young people. Prices in cities like Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco have skyrocketed to the point where even families with two solid incomes are locked out. Renters face the same struggle, with costs rising faster than paychecks. For countless Americans, the idea of stability through housing is slipping away, replaced by the anxiety of wondering if they'll ever have a permanent place to call their own. The same can be said for education. For decades, college was marketed as the golden ticket to opportunity. Families sacrificed, borrowed, and saved in the hope that higher education would open doors. But the system has shifted dramatically. Tuition costs have soared, leaving students with crushing debt that takes decades to repay. Instead of unlocking opportunities, many graduates step into the workforce already burdened by a financial weight that shapes their entire future. What was once an investment in success has become a gamble that doesn't always pay off. Even daily necessities reflect this decline. Walk into a grocery store and you'll feel it immediately. A simple basket of food costs far more than it did just a few years ago. Items that were once staples for working families, eggs, bread, milk, vegetables, now feel like luxuries. Parents find themselves making difficult choices about what to buy, and seniors on fixed incomes often have to ration meals. Inflation isn't just an abstract number. It's a force changing the daily lives of millions. This isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a larger trend where the cost of living rises faster than incomes, leaving ordinary people squeezed from every direction. Gas prices fluctuate, healthcare remains one of the most expensive in the world, and utility bills keep climbing. Each individual increase might seem manageable, but together they form an overwhelming pressure that wears people down. Beneath these financial struggles lies something even more troubling: the erosion of hope. America was once defined not only by prosperity, but by optimism, a belief that tomorrow would be better than today. That optimism is fading. Surveys show that more and more Americans, especially younger generations, believe they will be worse off than their parents. This reversal of expectations is unprecedented in modern history. It speaks to a deeper cultural shift, where dreams are replaced by doubts, and opportunity feels more like an illusion than a guarantee. And yet, even as these struggles mount, the conversation often gets lost in headlines about political battles, global conflicts, or celebrity scandals. The reality of daily life, the paycheck that doesn't stretch, the rent that eats half of someone's income, the healthcare bill that wipes out savings, rarely dominates national debates. But for the families living it, this is the crisis that defines their existence. What we're witnessing is more than just economic hardship. It is a transformation in what it means to live in America. The middle class, once considered the backbone of the nation, is shrinking. Wealth is increasingly concentrated in fewer hands, and opportunities that once lifted families are slipping away. This isn't just about money, it's about dignity, stability, and the promise of a better tomorrow. As we dig deeper into what's happening across America, it becomes clear that the challenges aren't confined to a single issue. They are interconnected, forming a web of pressures that affect nearly every part of daily life. When the housing market becomes unaffordable, it doesn't just mean fewer people buying homes. It also means fewer young families putting down roots, fewer communities with long-term stability, and fewer children growing up with a sense of permanence. The loss ripples outward. Small businesses see less foot traffic. Local schools struggle with declining enrollment, and entire neighborhoods can shift in character within just a few years. Take healthcare as another example. For decades, it has been a source of pride and frustration in equal measure. On one hand, America leads the world in medical innovation, developing treatments and technologies that save lives. On the other, the system is one of the most expensive and unequal. Millions of Americans either lack coverage or face bills so high that they avoid seeking care altogether. A simple medical emergency, a broken bone, a surgery, a chronic illness can wipe out years of savings. For families already struggling with rent, groceries, and gas, this additional burden can feel like the final straw. When we talk about healthcare in numbers, the picture becomes even starker. The average American family spends thousands of dollars each year on insurance premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket expenses. Compare that to rising rents and student loans, and you begin to see why so many households live paycheck to paycheck. It's not just about surviving day to day. It's about the constant fear that one unexpected bill could push everything over the edge. Education, too, plays a critical role in this broader decline. The cost of sending a child to college has ballooned far beyond what most families can reasonably afford. In the 1980s, a part-time job could help cover tuition. Today, that idea feels laughable. Even full-time work barely makes a dent, forcing students to rely on loans that follow them well into adulthood. The weight of student debt isn't just financial, it delays milestones like marriage, homeownership, and starting a family. It shifts the trajectory of entire generations. All of these struggles are happening against the backdrop of growing inequality. While everyday Americans fight to keep up with bills, the wealthiest individuals and corporations continue to accumulate vast fortunes. The gap between the top and everyone else has widened to levels not seen in nearly a century. This divide isn't just an economic statistic. It affects the way communities function, the opportunities available to children, and the overall sense of fairness in society. Think about cities that once stood as symbols of opportunity. Detroit was once the beating heart of the auto industry, a place where hard work in a factory could support a family, buy a home, and send kids to college. Today, large parts of the city bear the scars of decline. Abandoned homes, shuttered factories, and struggling neighborhoods serve as reminders of what happens when industries vanish and nothing replaces them. Detroit isn't alone. Cities across the Midwest, once hubs of manufacturing, now face similar struggles. Even in booming coastal cities, prosperity isn't shared equally. Gleaming high-rises sit next to tents and shelters, a stark contrast that defines modern urban life. The impact isn't limited to economics. It touches culture, identity, and even the sense of belonging. For many Americans, there is a growing feeling of being left behind, ignored by leaders, and excluded from the promise of progress. This feeling doesn't just breed frustration, it fuels division. Communities turn inward, political debates grow more hostile, and unity becomes harder to find. It's important to recognize that these challenges don't appear overnight. They are the result of years, even decades, of decisions, policies, and global shifts. Jobs moved overseas in search of cheaper labor. Housing was treated as an investment rather than a necessity. Education became a business rather than a public service. Each choice made sense to someone at the time, but collectively they have reshaped the American landscape. At the same time, technology has accelerated these changes. Automation and artificial intelligence promise efficiency, but they also eliminate jobs that once provided stability. The digital revolution has created enormous wealth for some, while others are left struggling to adapt. This tension between progress and displacement is one of the defining features of the modern era. Yet, despite all of this, there remains resilience across the country. Families, communities, and individuals continue to push forward. They adapt, innovate, and search for new ways to survive and thrive. Farmers turn to local markets, teachers create online resources, and small businesses find ways to compete against global giants. This resilience doesn't erase the struggles, but it shows that the spirit of perseverance still runs deep. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, it becomes clear that the American decline is not just about economics or politics. It is about the everyday realities that touch every household. Consider the cost of raising a family. From childcare to healthcare, from groceries to education. The financial burden has grown to levels that many parents can barely manage. A recent estimate suggests that raising a child from birth to adulthood in the United States now costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. For families already struggling, that figure isn't just daunting, it's discouraging. It forces couples to rethink decisions about having children, which in turn affects population growth and the future structure of society. This shrinking sense of security bleeds into the workforce as well. For decades, a job was more than just a paycheck. It came with benefits like health insurance, pensions, and the assurance of stability. But today, the nature of work has shifted. Temporary contracts, gig work, and low-paying service jobs dominate large parts of the economy. While these positions provide flexibility, they rarely provide security. A single missed paycheck can push someone into debt, while the absence of retirement benefits means that millions of workers will face old age with little more than social security to rely on. The housing crisis, too, reflects these broader patterns. In cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York, housing has become so expensive that even high-income professionals struggle to buy it. Younger generations increasingly rely on renting, but rents rise year after year, consuming half or more of a person's income. Meanwhile, older generations who once relied on housing as a form of wealth building now find their children unable to follow the same path. This generational divide adds a new layer to the feeling that something has been lost. Across the country, homelessness has become one of the most visible signs of decline. In places like California, entire neighborhoods now coexist with tent encampments. Families live out of cars. Individuals set up makeshift shelters under bridges, and shelters themselves overflow with demand. While homelessness has always existed, the scale today is unprecedented in modern America. It highlights not only the failures of housing policy, but also the fragility of a system where losing a job, suffering an illness, or facing an eviction can spiral into catastrophe. Another factor reshaping the landscape is immigration. America has always been a nation of immigrants, drawing people from around the world with the promise of opportunity. But today, the debate over immigration often highlights the country's internal struggles. Some argue that new arrivals strain already limited resources, while others insist that immigrants bring vitality, labor, and growth. What is undeniable is that immigration policy intersects with the broader challenges of housing, healthcare, and education, adding to the sense of complexity and tension in American life. Technology, while offering countless benefits, has introduced its own form of disruption. Automation in factories, AI in offices, and e-commerce in retail have reshaped entire industries. Workers who once relied on stable jobs in manufacturing or customer service now find themselves competing in an economy that prizes specialized skills. While some thrive, others are left behind, creating a divide between those who can adapt and those who cannot. Even infrastructure reflects the nation's struggles. Roads, bridges, water systems, and public transit networks, once considered the pride of modern engineering, are now in urgent need of repair. Billions are required just to maintain what already exists, yet funding often falls short. The result is crumbling bridges, outdated airports, and water crises in cities like Flint, Michigan. Infrastructure may seem distant from daily life, but it underpins everything from economic growth to public safety. Its decline is a silent signal of how much the country has neglected long-term investment. The emotional toll of these overlapping crises cannot be overstated. Stress, anxiety, and depression have risen across all age groups. People are not only worried about money, but also about stability, safety, and the future. Surveys consistently show that Americans are less optimistic about their children's prospects than ever before. That loss of confidence is not just personal. It reflects a national mood, a sense that the country has drifted from its original promise. And yet, within this atmosphere of decline, there are glimmers of resilience. Communities are experimenting with new solutions, from local farming initiatives to cooperative housing models. Grassroots movements push for healthcare reform, education access, and more affordable housing. These efforts don't always succeed, but they reflect the enduring belief that change is possible. The question is whether these small sparks of hope can grow large enough to reshape the system itself. When we compare America's struggles with those of other countries, a clearer picture begins to form. The challenges here are not unique, but the way they manifest is deeply tied to the American system. Take housing, for example. Cities like London, Hong Kong, and Sydney face astronomical housing prices that make ownership nearly impossible for young people. In London, the average home costs more than 12 times the median salary. In Hong Kong, that figure rises even higher, with apartments so small that families live in spaces barely larger than parking spots. In these cases, housing has become less about shelter and more about speculation, with investors treating real estate as a commodity rather than a necessity. America now mirrors these global patterns, particularly in cities where housing is seen as an investment tool for global wealth rather than a foundation for local families. Education costs provide another point of comparison. In many European countries, higher education is either free or heavily subsidized. Students in Germany, for instance, can attend university without incurring massive debt. Contrast that with the United States, where graduates often leave school owing tens of thousands of dollars. This debt doesn't just impact individual lives. It shapes the economy as a whole, delaying milestones like home ownership, family formation, and entrepreneurship. In countries where education is more accessible, young people start their adult lives with fewer burdens, giving them more flexibility to take risks and innovate. Healthcare offers perhaps the starkest contrast. In Canada, the UK, and much of Europe, healthcare is viewed as a right. Systems vary, but the underlying principle remains the same. Access to care should not depend on wealth. While these systems face their own challenges, they shield citizens from the kind of financial ruin that medical emergencies often cause in the United States. Here, healthcare is not only a service but a business, with costs driven by profit motives, administrative complexity, and a lack of universal protections. As a result, millions of Americans skip necessary treatments, delay doctor visits, or ration medication. This reality sets America apart from other wealthy nations, underscoring the unique strain placed on its people. When we turn to inequality, the global comparison is again instructive. Wealth inequality exists everywhere, but in the United States, the gap between the richest and everyone else is among the widest in the developed world. The top 1% controls more wealth than the bottom half combined. In countries like Sweden or Denmark, progressive taxation and strong social safety nets help soften these divides. In the US, however, lower taxes for the wealthy and limited social programs amplify inequality, leaving many citizens with little protection against economic shocks. Even infrastructure highlights this difference. Travel to Japan or much of Western Europe, and you'll find high-speed trains, efficient public transit, and modern airports. In the US, however, many transit systems are decades behind. Highways crumble with potholes, and airports struggle to keep up with demand. This lag doesn't just inconvenience travelers, it hampers economic growth and signals a broader neglect of collective investment. These global comparisons matter because they highlight choices. Other nations face similar challenges, yet their systems cushion citizens in ways America often does not. By prioritizing healthcare access, affordable education, and robust infrastructure, they provide a stronger foundation for their populations. The US, meanwhile, leans heavily on individual responsibility, leaving families to carry burdens that elsewhere would be shared more broadly. At the same time, America's struggles are magnified by its size and diversity. What works in a smaller, more homogeneous country is harder to implement in a vast nation with deep political divides. Policies that might succeed in Norway or South Korea face enormous resistance in a country of over 330 million people. This scale complicates reform, but it does not erase the need for it. The global lens also underscores a cultural shift. For generations, America was seen as the model, the place other countries looked to for inspiration. Today, the reverse is often true. Americans look abroad to see how others have solved the problems that weigh so heavily here. Whether it's affordable childcare in France, high-speed rail in Japan, or universal healthcare in Canada. These examples serve as both inspiration and reminder that decline is not inevitable. It is the result of choices. The consequences of these pressures extend far beyond the material. They seep into the psychology of daily life, shaping how people see themselves, their futures, and even their country. When the cost of housing, healthcare, or education feels insurmountable, individuals don't just adjust their budgets, they adjust their expectations. Generations once told that hard work would guarantee stability now question whether that promise was ever real. For many, the American dream feels like a relic, a story told in history books rather than a living reality. You can see this shift most clearly among younger generations. Millennials and Gen Z came of age during recessions, pandemics, and spiraling costs. Unlike their parents, they are less likely to own homes, less likely to have stable, long-term jobs, and more burdened by debt. Surveys consistently show declining faith in institutions, from government to corporations to universities. Many openly admit they believe they LLB better off than their parents, a dramatic departure from the optimism that once defined American identity. This generational malaise has cultural consequences, fueling movements that demand change and reshaping the political landscape in unpredictable ways. Mental health is another casualty of these pressures. Studies reveal rising rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout, often tied directly to financial stress and instability. When families live paycheck to paycheck, when young adults feel they're running in place despite working multiple jobs, when parents worry daily about affording childcare or medical bills, the toll is not just economic, it is deeply personal. This erosion of mental well-being weakens communities, straining relationships and feeding into broader societal unrest. The cultural narrative of self-reliance also complicates matters. In the United States, there has long been pride in the idea of pulling oneself up by the bootstraps, of conquering obstacles through grit and determination. But when systemic barriers, sky-high tuition, inaccessible housing, medical bankruptcies repeatedly block the path forward, self-reliance starts to feel like a burden rather than a virtue. People begin to internalize failure, blaming themselves for problems that are structural in nature. This cycle deepens frustration, resentment, and hopelessness. And yet, within this environment, there is also resilience. Communities are finding ways to adapt. Families share homes across generations, pooling resources to survive. Local organizations provide support where governments fall short. Innovators are experimenting with new forms of housing, new education models, and healthcare solutions that bypass traditional systems. These efforts, while often small in scale, demonstrate that people are unwilling to accept decline passively. They want answers, and they are searching for them. The political dimension cannot be ignored either. Economic decline and rising inequality fuel polarization. As citizens gravitate toward leaders who promise quick fixes or radical change, some demand stronger safety nets and progressive reforms, while others call for deregulation and a return to traditional values. The gap between these visions reflects the broader divide in American society, a divide made sharper by the daily struggles families face. When economic anxiety runs high, trust in government wanes, and space opens up for populist voices on both sides of the spectrum. Internationally, these struggles also affect America's role on the world stage. A country wrestling with deep internal challenges often struggles to project stability abroad. Rivals point to homelessness, healthcare costs, and inequality as evidence that the American model is faltering. Allies question whether the US can lead effectively while so many of its citizens face hardship at home. In this sense, domestic decline becomes a geopolitical issue, shaping not just life within America's borders but also its standing across the globe. Looking forward, the question is not whether these challenges exist, they are undeniable. The question is whether they can be addressed in ways that restore stability and hope. History suggests it is possible. After the Great Depression, after World War II, after civil rights struggles, the nation found ways to adapt and rebuild. But doing so required collective will, bold policies, and a recognition that decline is not destiny. Today, the tools exist: technological innovation, vast wealth, and a tradition of reinvention. But whether they will be deployed for the common good remains uncertain. Ultimately, what is at stake is more than economics. It is about the kind of society people want to live in, the values they want to pass to future generations, and the role they believe their country should play in the world. A nation where housing, healthcare, and education are privileges reserved for the wealthy is a nation where opportunity narrows. A nation where basic stability is within reach, for all is one where hope expands. The path forward will depend on choices. Choices by policymakers, by communities, and by individuals who refuse to accept that decline is inevitable.